Hi, my name is John Gensler, and in this series of videos, on this network. We're going to take a look at whether Isaac Newton's right, um, and for the most part, we're going to assume that his calculation is pretty accurate. Um, I've done my own calculations, um, and they kind of coincide with Isaac Newton's. I actually learned that back in 1996 at a Templeton conference on science and religion that I was invited to um, by Professor Tren at Victoria College at the University of Toronto. When I went there with a few of my theories and my timeline, I was shocked that one of the professors said to me, "You're like Newton." I had not realized that Isaac Newton had done a lot of work on when the end times would be, when God would return and have that direct relationship with human beings again. And, you know, John Maynard Keynes had purchased Isaac Newton's work on this subject. Of course, Isaac did this work um, quietly, hid it away from the public at large because he didn't want to get into the troubles that Copernicus and others have gotten into. So in the end, um, when his papers were being auctioned off, John Maynard Keynes purchased these, brought them to Israel, and they've been sitting in Israeli libraries for a long time. Not too long ago, the Israelis have started letting people access these. So I think that Isaac Newton is right because I think what's happening today is, and why you're seeing things implode the way they are, is that Satan challenged God, as we know from the in the beginning, when he decided to persuade Adam and Eve to taste the apple from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And of course, God had instructed Adam and Eve not to do that. Um, so, with Adam and Eve doing that, God had to respond to Satan or respond to Satan's challenge. So, reading the Bible and putting myself in God's shoes, I would say, because God has to obey the laws of the universe, because he is the universe. One of the things that I talked about at the conference was my thought of an immortal trinity of force, matter, and the innate intelligence of the universe, that being God. So, when mankind, for example, when God created us in his image, we have a physical presence and an intellectual presence. And that's what God is, a physical presence, everything in the universe, and an intellectual presence, the controlling of things, uh, all knowledge, all power in the universe. So the Big Bang actually to me is the birth of God. Um, and as we know, God says he's the Alpha and Omega. And as we know from things we're discovering from science, that matter cannot be created or destroyed. So it is Alpha and Omega. So when I read the Bible and I think about what God might do, I think the obvious thing to say to Satan is, listen, I took 6 days to create man, and you're going to have 6 days to make man in your image, to teach them his way. To me, that's balancing, that's fair. And Satan's 6 days started from the day that Adam and Eve were banished from the Garden of Eden. So, for those of you who have been interested in theories and calculations from Bishop Ussher through the to the Jehovah's Witnesses and others, including Isaac Newton now, uh, you know, they all tried to calculate 6,000 years essentially from the date of creation of Adam. I think that was the wrong starting point. I think actually Adam and Eve were fine until that time and until God said, boom, you're out of the Garden of Eden and you're now living within under Satan's rule for this time. So, and when Isaac Newton came up with 2060 based on a series of very meticulous calculations, it kind of tied into that timeline that I'm thinking of. So for this, I'm just going to take Isaac Newton's 2060 because far be it from me to try and challenge the father of my modern science and the genius of Isaac Newton. It just so happens that all what I will try to do now that we're in that time or getting closer to it, things that Isaac Newton couldn't see, I'm going to try and fill in that timeline a little bit. So when we look at 2060 and we look at the Bible and we look at Revelation and the things that are about to unfold, we know that there's going to be a silence in the heavens for about a half an hour before Christ returns, um, delivers us from Satan. So call that the second Exodus. Um, where in Exodus, the Moses was able to liberate and free the Jews from the Egyptians. Basically, we're going to repeat Exodus, but on the humans on for all human beings, and we're going to be freed from Satan. So, and it's going to be led by Jesus. So, then he's going to have a millennial rule, which will have the resurrection of everyone that's ever lived. And as God says, he knew us from the womb. And we know that's possible from what science has taught us about DNA. DNA is very specific, ties into who we are. So call this cloning 1 infinity.0. So, God can already do the cloning that science is dreaming about. So I'm confident that God will be able to replicate us all and do the promised resurrection. So if we take that silence in the heavens for about half an hour, which would be just under 21 years. So if we take 2060 and we subtract 21 years from that, we get back to a little bit closer to where we are at 2039. So to get to 2039, I think then we go back the 3.5 years. So I'd be looking for, at that point, a gigantic earthquake, which hits Jerusalem and destroys the city. And then before that, we back up 3.5 years to the time around 2035. And for that, I'm looking for things between now and then to become very unstable, things to deteriorate from where we are, as we see people are very angry. Mass shootings almost every day, everywhere around the world. Um, as, so I expect that deterioration to continue. Also, the political climate to deteriorate continually, and more specifically in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. And then what I'm looking for specifically is if you go to the 1996 publication from a Wilton Park conference, many of you have heard of the New World Order uh, that came out from the Wilton Park conference at that time. But not many of you have heard of the companion piece. So, like in a Supreme Court decision or any court of appeal, a higher court with multiple justices, as I've argued before in Ontario, I argued before the Court of Appeal of Ontario, and then I argued before the court above that. So I argued at first before one justice, Justice McCombs. Um, I was arguing that a judge could not sit on a tax case because, to me, because judges are paid out of income taxes, they have a natural bias, or as Justice de Grandpré set the bar, a reasonable apprehension of bias. So what I argued before Judge Cavian in the lower court was that because he's paid by the taxes, he can't be seen as an independent arbitrator. Now, Judge Cavian told me that because he was paid by the province of Ontario and that the tax case was federal, um, that there was a level of space between. So he believed that he could sit independently on a tax case. But I argued back that province of Ontario's taxes were a percentage of the federal taxes. So if no federal tax would mean no provincial tax and no money to pay his salary. So we disagreed on that, and of course I appealed it to the next level of court, argued it before Justice McCombs. Justice McCombs, well, and Judge Cavian. Everyone was really good to me. Justice McCombs was a great coincidence because one of the arguments I was citing for judicial independence was a paper he wrote. And then eventually, Justice McCombs dismissed my arguments, but in a really cool way. He said, "You've got great arguments, John, but you got so many. Just focus on a couple of core arguments and do a better job on those." So I went to the next level of court, argued before three justices in Ontario, the level just below the Supreme Court of Canada. And I found that two of the justices were just totally disinterested in what I had to say, weren't even really listening. The one justice who did ask me questions was actually the female justice of the group of three. But they pretty much had their mind made up. They went out, they sat for a bit, and then they dismissed it. Now I could have taken it to the Supreme Court, but I decided not to take it from there. So anyway, getting back to what we're looking at, while I was doing my research for my trial, or while I was doing my trial prep at the law university or the law library at the University of York, and I was also using the Scott Reference Library at York, and because I was tying it into some human rights things, I was looking at some UN documents, and I came across this document, the minority piece from a Wilton Park conference called the United Nations and the New World Disorder. And in that document, Interestingly enough, I found the United Nations has a contingency plan for Jerusalem, one that's never spoken about publicly, and that is to declare Jerusalem an international city under UN control and to be run the way Antarctica is run. So, one of the things I'm looking for in the future is for things to deteriorate between Israel and Palestine to the point where the UN actually has to move on that proposal and declare Jerusalem an international city. So once the UN does that, uh, because I believe the United Nations is the wild beast, the seven crowns are the United States, the United Kingdom, Russia, China, France, Japan, and Germany. And the 10 crowns are the rotating members of the Security Council, which represent all the other countries. So while there are only 5 official countries with the veto, um, Japan and Germany have kind of been given quasi status as well. So you can verify that. You can go and look at all the UN documents. I'll be posting the cover page of the document I'm referring to and the page that references the plan, the United Nations plan for Jerusalem. So let's say about 2035 that things deteriorate to where they are in the direction that they're going, and that continues. And the United Nations decides to do that, make that, pull that move off. Then from that day, I want to look forward 3.5 years, and if by chance 3.5 years from the date that Jerusalem falls under United Nations control, I'm going to say that those fulfill the couple of important um, milestones in our march towards Armageddon in 2060. So, one of the things that we're also supposed to see is that we will have our own Moses and Aaron uh, making the predictions that Moses and Aaron did for the Jews during the first Exodus. And that's where my timeline and what this network, End Time News Network, which I'm founding, is going to concentrate on. We're going to be looking at what's happening in the world with those milestones in mind. And, you know, what we what we're going to be victims of in the way. So, you know, it is it is discouraging, but it's also um, encouraging because we have an example in the Bible of what we're going through. And basically, one of the most important books in the Bible, I think, for everybody today is Job. I think we're all living the life of Job right now. Um, Unfortunately, we're going to be suffering like Job. Um, Many of us won't make it to that 2060 point, but we will be resurrected afterwards. And we will be um, taken care of in Christ's millennial rule, which should begin sometime after 2060. And his millennial rule will last for 1,000 years and will be taken care of the same way as the Israelites were for the 40 years in the wilderness. And during that time, we're actually going to be learning um, God's way of doing things. We're getting reacquainted with God and his method of doing things. So, and then after that, when Satan is loosed for a short time at the end of Christ's millennial rule, for God to be fair to Satan, we're going to be left with a choice. And there are some of us who will, just like when the Israelites witnessed all the miracles and all the things God did for them, some of them turned back to a statue, a golden calf. And not everybody's going to choose God's way. So, but at that point, God has proven his mandate is the right one, and those who decide willingly to go along with God and his mandate, they will be given eternal life and the opportunity to live and learn from God directly again, just the way Adam and Eve had it back in the beginning. So, the Bible does talk about these end times, saying those people who are dead will be the lucky ones. They'll be covered by the grave, protected by the grave. Won't have to witness all the things that and live through the things that are going to happen. So the only thing I can think of to temper it is try and create a new political party in Canada that sort of has this in its mindset, um, sort of prepare Canada, because one of the things where I really differentiate myself from most religions or all other religions organized, they all have this focus on themselves as being on the right side. So, there's great information from things like the Philadelphia Church of God and many others, the Jehovah's Witnesses. There's good in the Catholic Church. There's good in the Protestant churches. But they all want to say that it's the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia are all on the side of right. I want to make this clear. All nations are on the side of wrong. Um, it's not going to be this thing where it's Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, etc., versus Russia, China, etc. That's not what's happening. This is between God and Satan. We're caught in the middle, unfortunately, and Satan has control over all governments. And I would like to start a political party that I think could pull away from that. I don't know whether we're going to get there. I mean, I'm encouraged by the number of people who are non-voters in Canada, like myself, 10.5 million people who have come to the right decision about the uselessness of the current political parties. We got a choice of Tweedledee and Tweedledum and Tweedledummer between Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre. I don't even consider the NDP and Jasmeet Singh as anything near credible. So, and those two parties have been operating as a tag team of doom for working Canadians for over 155 years now. The same way that in the United States, the Republicans and the Democrats have been a tag team of doom for their working Americans for, almost 255 years, because they got a little bit of a head start on us, 1776 versus our 1867. So I think we need to get out of that mindset. I think Canadians are right, and I think I bring a little bit of a different or more of a broader, deeper set of experience. So, a little bit about myself. I'm from a poor family, working class. I grew up in a small house in North Toronto. My parents bought it for $13,000 in 1961. Uh, my dad worked three jobs. He worked for Goodyear Tire in the union, and then on the side, he worked for a construction company, learning the plumbing, electrical, and carpentry trades. And he also did a little bit of home renovations himself on the side. So he was uh, he was born, as he likes to say, the poorest of the poor in his village just outside of Graz in Austria. He was kicked out of the house at 13 because they couldn't feed him, so he was sent to a farm to work. With the war going on, made his way over to here at 18, and started getting things going. Now, he put a roof over our heads. I have three brothers and two sisters. He fed us all. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. She was also from a poor family in um, Toronto, of Irish descent, working class family. They grew up in the Regent Park area, one of the poorer areas in Toronto. So, you know, we didn't have a lot. My father worked hard. He had a hard life, and some of his, one of the reasons I don't feel sorry for too many people is, you know, people see me as a white male, privileged, apparently. I can tell you, white males, um, as Boom Bust and Echo shows, white males born in the 1960s are not privileged at all. The working class white males. We were born, as Boom Bust and Echo says, in the wrong time. The demographics have gone against us. You know, not that there's anything wrong with employment equity and making up for, acknowledging things that were wrong in the past, but white males have been the painted as the evil, to justify government's sort of abuse of them. Um, so, back in the early 80s when I graduated from college, most of the jobs with the government, employment ads were, the joke of the day was the way they were written: no white males need apply. Um, that's still pretty much the case today. Um, yeah, there's always been rich privilege. Um, you know, this is not unique to whites. This has been the same in Asia, the same in Africa, with kings and tribal leaders, the same in native culture where you had tribal leaders, chiefs, etc. This isn't unique. This is, and I mean, to you got to admire the 1%. They're able to split us very effectively. They love to play up the differences. Meanwhile, we're all kind of suffering the same thing. And thank goodness things are evolving, um, especially in the United States. Um, I was listening to a couple of Black American female professors discussing things. And to my surprise, I guess because they do have that 90-year head start on it, they were talking about how, um, you know, blacks are discovering now in the States. They can have every political position in a community. I wish I could remember specifically if it was Baltimore, but they were talking about a specific city in the US where every, from the mayor, governor, top down, was basically filled with black African American political leaders. Yet they still made decisions in favor of corporations over the people. So there was a meeting which was attended by Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, and apparently they were booed terribly by the black community there as sellouts, which they truly are. Um, so the black community in the United States is really getting a wake-up call, and there was a great documentary on TVO not too long ago about Appalachia and listening to the black leaders around Appalachia talking about, this really is a division between the haves and the have-not, the rich and the poor, and we got to work together to, you know, this isn't about black or white or native, or this is about rich and poor. This is about have and have not. This is about the widening gap of wealth. Wealth inequality is our unifying thing, and that's going to be the basis of, I'm part of the 99%, proud member of the 99%. And that's what we need, a political party to come in and get rid of the conservatives and the liberals in Canada and have a new political party in Canada to prepare us better, for what's coming. So that's kind of where I'm at. Um, tell you a little bit about me. My background is really diverse. As I said, grew up poor. Always been interested in politics and religion and end time, the kind of knowing where that might be in the future. I do believe in God. I do believe in the Bible. I think the one thing I would say to people is you want to read the Bible as the owner's manual. We're God's creation. He knows what's best for us, how we can live forever. And that's kind of what the message he gave us in the Bible is. So, you know, sort of the tools or the maintenance requirements of how we are to live forever. So, we are supposed to be vegetarian. We are supposed to be heterosexual. Uh, we're supposed to work hard physically. Um, so, and keep ourselves fit and everything. But so, in that mind, throughout high school, I was interested in politics. And in 1979, once I turned of age to run, a friend of mine, Bill, and I decided we would run in the 1979 federal election. I would run. Bill was going to be my campaign manager, and we were going to run on a couple of things. We wanted to legalize gambling, legalize prostitution, legalize drugs, and went to a friend of our family's who happened to be a professor at York University in political science, Hector Massey, and he encouraged me not to run, to actually join the Liberal Party because he was the riding president. And I decided, okay, I'll take a shot. And my parents were supporters of the Liberal Party. So, like everybody else, I followed blindly into the Liberal Party. I won the position of Vice President Youth for the Yorkville Federal Liberal Association, followed that up by being Vice President King Township for the York North Provincial Liberal Association, and took part in several elections with the Liberals. And then finally, in 1985, I got my shot. They needed somebody after 45 years plus of conservative rule. The Liberal Party in Ontario was kind of decimated. They didn't have a full slate of candidates that they wanted in every riding. So there was, in the riding of Etobicoke, there was a candidate that they didn't want. So I got the tap on the shoulder to parachute in and run, and did okay. Did better than expected. So a lot of people all of a sudden had a lot of hope for what I might do as a Liberal in the future. I lost to Ed Philip, the incumbent, NDP incumbent, who held the riding for several years and several more afterwards, and in fact became one of Bob Ray's minister. You could call him the minister of everything in a sense, because he was one of the more experienced members when Bob Ray became Premier of Ontario. The NDP took power, and of course, did not have depth on the benches. So during that time, I got to work with the likes of Pierre Trudeau, Jean Chrétien, Sergio Marchi, Eugene Whalen, and many, many others. David Peterson. I also got the opportunity to chat with Joe Clark and Bob Ray. One of the things that I laugh about, a lot of these guys are lawyers, and Bob Ray once said politics was more about managing client expectations to a group of lawyers he was talking to. And basically, that's the way they see, they got to manage our expectations. But that's not a philosophy I agree with. I don't, as I said, I ended up in court. So after that, having access to, I was also appointed to David Peterson's Committee on Election Preparedness. So I had access to the corridors of power for a little while. But as I had the chance to observe them, I thought to myself, there's no way anything's ever going to get done with these guys because, they're just, that's not what they're there to do. So I left the Liberal Party in '86, and ever since then I've been doing things on the side. But then I started my own real estate company, was developing houses, had a rental business going. But with the crash of the real estate market in Ontario, that brought down companies like Olympia and York. Well, it was actually worldwide because, of course, Canary Wharf. I was no smarter than them, no better, and I got stuck with a lot of real estate and a lot of debt, and did some things to try and hold on to that, which eventually led me to my time in court and time in prison. So, I've seen that part of it as well. I went to prison in '98, and, or actually, sorry, went to prison in the spring of '99. I started nope, yes. So my first date in court was in December '98. Ended up in prison in the spring of '99. Got out, then ended up finding a job and just staying there for the last 23 years. So it's only now that I've gotten around to getting back to the point of where I could pick up where I left off in the. So now I'm going to dedicate my retirement to just trying to get thing get ready for 2060. Hopefully, get this country ready for 2060, and we'll see. So, as I say, there are good people everywhere. I mean, John Chrétien is a nice guy. David Peterson is a nice guy. Through my job, I had the opportunity to meet the senators from Alberta at an energy conference in Washington, D.C. Got to meet Newt Gingrich, got to meet generals, got to meet ambassadors at the National Press Club. Uh, Very interesting when a law firm, um, well, the law firm is Denton's, and you can look them up. They're an international law firm. Uh, they have everybody. Stephen Harper, Jean Chrétien, Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich joked at the meeting that he doesn't know why Denton's hired them. He's not a lawyer, he's a historian. But Denton's keeps everybody, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. They're all members of the Denton's organization. So good on them. And the nice thing is about going to these conferences where it is lawyers and their bigger clients, because I worked for one of their bigger clients. One of the things I worked on was energy for the company I worked for. And because we were a large consumer of energy, I got invited to these conferences to get insights into the future. So one of the people there was former Homeland Security Director and Governor of Pennsylvania, um, who owns a big part of the shale play with Mitt Romney. So Governor Ridge, Tom Ridge, actually is the governor. Uh, it just shows you how entwined and incestful this stuff is, and even in the politics in Ontario. I mean, before that, like as I said, I was in real estate, and around Woodbridge and stuff, the land deals, you'd see vendor's lawyer, Brady and Partners, purchaser's lawyer, Brady and Partners. That whole Rudy Brady, Marco Muzzo, Freddie DeGasperis triumvirate. Um, that sort of controls GTA real estate, um, or a major facet of GTA real estate. Uh, and of course the infrastructure. Um, so it's not that these people are bad. I met great people in prison as well, including people who murdered people. I mean, my prison time was a piece of cake. First night I was in, started in the Dawn jail, and was the third man in a cell. So I was in on the 3C South, that range, and got into a cell, and I was the third person in that cell. I was sleeping on the floor because the two people uh, in the cell before me already had the upper and lower bunk, so I was sleeping on the floor on a mattress literally about that thick with a very thin blanket. And that first night in prison, I got called out by a biker who yelled into the cell, "You're a cop. I know you're a cop. Get out here. I'm going to take care of you." So in prison, you got to stand up for yourself. So I got out of my cell, got up to him, and just I guess being lucky, uh, the little black kid who was sentenced right behind me came running up and he goes, "No, no, no, that guy's cool. He told the judge to fuck off." And as soon as he said that, people looked at me and people said, "You told the judge to fuck off?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And fortunately for me, that young kid didn't really understand the context of the way I told Judge Cavian to fuck off because it was more in a dismissive type thing. Judge Cavian laughed. He's a great judge. He wrote me a great letter of reference for my pardon afterwards, after a long, year-long battle to get my pardon, because the courts lost all my documents and there was a major fine that was part of my prison, my sentence, along with the time in prison. And nobody could make the determination to write that off. But Judge Cavian gave me additional time in lieu of that fine, as he said, "John, your goals are laudable, but we're going to need some custodial time." I go, "I know you didn't take off to the Bahamas or anything like that, but, you know." So he fined me the minimum, um, and then added the $100,000 fine as well. So I owed like, you know, even though the Toronto Star, when they printed the article, made it look like I was trying to get away with 12 million bucks, it was only literally tens of thousands. So between the fine and the penalties, it was like 300 grand. And I had said to the court, "Just ask the judge." He gave me the extra time in lieu of paying the fine. So after a year of looking for my papers, court documents, and not finding them, they said it was destroyed in a flood in the records. So they finally said, "Well, the only way we're going to be able to do this is go to the judge." And I said, "That's what I told you a year ago." And they finally did, and Judge Cavian wrote a great letter, and he said, "I remember John. He's done his time." And yes, that is the agreement. That was the sentence. So they were able to write off that debt, and I got issued my pardon pretty much a day after Judge Cavian wrote the letter. So, you know, yes, I told him to fuck off, but it was after that argument that he made about he was a provincial employee paid by the provincial government. Therefore, there was enough room between the province and the federal charges that he did satisfy himself that he was independent enough to make that decision. So I said, basically just fuck off and laughed, which he understood was a dismissive. It wasn't anything insulting Judge Cavian because he was a really good judge. I have to admit, the Crown that I had, Mark Cullen, he was really good. The judges I argued before were really good. Um, the investigative team from CRA, yeah, we had our differences. And I'll tell you a story about that in another video or I'll tell it right now. So when I first went in to be interviewed by CRA, I brought a tape recorder with me. And, there were three of them interviewing me. I brought a tape recorder. I said, "I want to record this session." And so they said, "Well, I'm going to have to read you your rights." And then after they read me my rights, they go, "Now we have to discuss this tape recording." They said, we're not able to talk with the tape recorder on." And I said, well, I'm not talking without, because there's three of you, one of me. Who's the court going to believe, you know? So I want to answer the questions and have it on tape so that there's no misunderstanding. I want the context and everything in there. So they decided, they said, you know, we can give you whatever you need, a stack of paper, pencil, pen, whatever you need to take notes. And I said, no, I want the tape recording. So then at the end of that, they had to say, well, we can't do the interview with the tape. So therefore, this interview is over. So I walked out of there, um, and they did the investigation on their own without ever asking me for any clarifications again. So, which was fine. Uh, they raided my offices, they raided the house. That's fine. Um, so, anyway, so everybody was really impressed in prison that I told the judge to fuck off. And all of a sudden, that broke all the tension, and there was no more fighting or thinking I was a cop. It was more, how did you tell a judge to fuck off? So, or you had the balls to tell a judge to fuck off. And then the rest of my time in prison was really easy because as a non smoker, everybody wanted to open up a store with me. I'm not, because they wanted the extra tobacco, extra cigarettes, and extra tobacco that they could get in through my canteen, because tobacco products were limited to a half pack per day. So, you know, I just said, fine, put money in my canteen, order the cigarettes. You know, they were willing to put extra money. I said, there's nothing really I want. Give me a few chips and a few chocolate bars. Uh, you know, um, I'm just going to do my time. The nice thing is, in prison, most people are there just to do their time. I mean, yeah, there were a couple of guys who had murdered people. There were collection officers for various criminal organizations, the mafia, the bikers, and stuff. Uh, but most people weren't really violent. They did crimes because they can't fit into the 9 to 5 job. They're not cut out for that. Um, so, you know, but they're not dumb. They're intelligent, smart, hardworking people, just like everybody else. I mean, I was impressed with some of the inventions I saw in prison. The bug for making coffee. So, you know, luckily working in the kitchen when I finally got to, because the Dawn jail was just an interim jail where they assess you and then they send you out to the prison to serve your sentence. I got obviously assessed to a minimum security prison and sent there, and you know, and I was working in the kitchen, so that was my assignment. And with the kitchen guys, basically we would bring back some coffee and other stuff, smuggle it back into the pod for later. And one of the things we smuggled back was coffee. And how are you going to make coffee in prison? Well, these guys had come up with this thing they call a bug. So you get a fork, you bend it to the point where it can fit into a plug. You have some rubber bands to insulate. You plug it into the plug with your fingers holding it on the rubber bands. You put the thing in the water, just like a kettle. It boils the water. So you got some hot coffee through the night, which I found amazing. And then turning broom handles into and plastic garbage bags filled up with some water into you know, weights. So they had barbell in a set. So, and then doing pull-ups and push-ups, and these guys are not slackers. They may be in prison, they've done some things, but they work hard. And one of the collection officers from the mafia, um, Dominic, I helped him out writing a couple of letters to a couple of his girlfriends, with the English and stuff. And one day I woke up in my cell and there was breakfast set up, coffee, French toast, and I go, what the hell? Who got into my cell and set this up? I'm a pretty sound sleeper. So then somebody said Dominic did it to thank you. So, these guys are pretty good guys. I'd say these guys are as equal to anybody I met in politics as well. Some of them even more so. I mean, Dominic, he was willing to sacrifice. There was one weekend, over a long weekend, we had a couple of bull dyke female guards, and we had like half a dozen or so of Vietnamese kids in our range. And these girls were chiding them, saying, "Hey, little man, little guy," and just making names of them. And Dominic stood up for them. He actually got sent to the hole for doing that. There was another time Dominic, we were short a meal. He went without. Um, so there aren't a lot of politicians that would sacrifice the way he sacrificed for his fellow inmates. So, you meet people like that as well in prison. And like I say, most of the guys are just trying to get by. The worst, the most important thing you got to avoid or is confrontation with any guards. There was one guard that I almost got into a confrontation with because there was a kid who had dietary restrictions, and the food wasn't suitable for him to eat, so he wanted to take an apple away with him because he didn't have the better part of his lunch. And the guard was giving him a hard time, and I wanted to go back and tell him about his dietary issues because there was a little bit of language communication barriers because he was Vietnamese, this little kid as well. And then a few guys that I got to know in prison that ran the store for me. They grabbed my arm and said, "No, no, no, come on, this is not what you want to do." Um, you know, it's guards who can keep you in prison longer than you need to be there. So I also got advice from inmates on because I was up for early parole, or sorry, early release, not parole yet. And went in, had an interview with two women and a blind guy. And, I pissed the women off because they said, "You're really actually enjoying your time here." And the blind guy was laughing. And I said, "Yeah, I'm learning a lot here. I wouldn't change it, and I have to exhaust my domestic means of remedy before I take my case to the United Nations." Um, and they asked, "Would you do it again?" And I said, "In similar circumstances, and the fact that I still believe I'm right, of course I would do it." So they turned me down for early release. And then I wrote to the superintendent of the prison and I said, "Listen, I was turned down for early release. I don't want it to affect my parole hearing that will be coming up soon because none of the reasons that they're denying me early release for were discussed in the meeting." So I said, "Is there a transcript of the meeting? Because I want to review it to see where they come up with these ridiculous reasons." So I got a call from one of the guards to go see the superintendent, and the superintendent, I got to the office and I said, I don't want to talk in here. Let's go for a walk. So we went for a walk, and he said, we don't keep transcripts of these meetings, but I've reviewed it, and there was a car waiting. I got fitted with an ankle bracelet, and I went right home with the ankle bracelet that day. So the superintendent was really cool. Then, of course, I spent the rest of my prison time on the ankle bracelet at home, and then, of course, was on parole for a while, and then I ended up with a job that I just left after 23 years. So, yeah, I've had a little bit of much wider, what you would say, experience than most people. So, from the powers or the halls of power to the prison cells. So, you know, I see things with a little different eye than most people. I see where the problems really are, and what we might do to fix them. So anyway, that's a little bit about me as well, and I hope you'll tune into other videos about. So I'm calling the One series, talking Armageddon, the countdown to 2060. Um, we're also going to be doing a show called Contributory Negligence, looking at how some decisions are made, but are made with only giving too much to one side, and therefore pushing the other side to actions that, and we'll look at that in different ways too. We'll look at some of the famous criminal cases out there that, we can show some motivation for things that have happened, try to get in some things that the media just doesn't talk about. Uh, our media is very, very bad. They're very lazy. Um, you know, for example, the buildup of Theranos wouldn't have happened without the media hyping at Bitcoin and this FTX. Unless Fortune and Forbes and then write an article just glorifying these cons, uh, and then every other media outlet just mimicking the crap. There's just no due diligence done in our media. So, I mean, notoriously bad. Fox and CNN, especially, are horribly bad. But in Canada, we have CTV, City TV, real crap out there. So we're going to try and explain things with a little bit broader eye to these things. So we've got contributory negligence, we've got the talking Armageddon, and we might have a couple of other shows and ideas. And hey, if you've got something to say and you want to join me on a show or something like that, let me know. More than happy to talk to you and listen to you. We're also going to look at, you know, science and God, and how science has really enlightened us into, or given us better or more in-depth information into verifying what God has told us in the Bible. Evolution doesn't bother me as a person who believes in God, because you know Darwin said, there's also another way to look at this, and the naturalist thing would be to look at this is that these um, mechanisms to improve were built in by God. And, his evolution thing, one of the things I'll show you from a pretty early transcript that I read at the University of Waterloo, and you can check it out on Wikipedia. Darwin said there are four things that have to be answered before evolution was, considered fully done. One is the fossil record has to be completed, which it hasn't been. Um, he also talked about we have to find how species are able to interbreed. The fact that they're not able to interbreed, I mean, the closest you get is a horse and a donkey to create a mule, and that mule in most cases it's not a viable species in the end because it can't procreate. So that is an issue that to me hasn't been satisfied. One of the questions that Darwin had about evolution hasn't been satisfied. The second was, how does a bee learn to make a honeycomb from nothing that's had that ability beforehand? So there's another thing that hasn't been fully explained, and then things as complex as the eye and stuff like that. So those four things that haven't yet to be explained and fully fleshed out to make evolution a real, actual, full theory. And then you look at something like carbon 14 and the science's reasonable assumptions, which I don't find reasonable at all. So carbon 14, the half-life itself, you have to assume it's X, but it's been X1, X2, and X3 over time, and we still don't have a definitive value for the half-life of C14. You also have science has to assume that it's spread evenly throughout the Earth, and we know that it's not. It's spread more towards the poles. There's a heavier concentration at the poles than there is towards the equator. You have to assume that the specimen itself does not have any contamination. And we know that background radiation contaminates every sample. And fourthly is that uniform, no disruption over time, that it's been consistent over time. And we know that that is not a reasonable assumption, because during the nuclear bomb testing in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we know that it was thrown way out. And so it's just, those aren't reasonable assumptions. And in my own personal research, when I compare the timing of Methuselah, the dendrochronology versus the C14, it's already out by 1,000 years, 5,000 years in or out. So, if you're 1,000 years out on 5,000 years or 6,000 years, what are you going to be out on 1,000,000,000 years? But not that that matters. We'll get into my interpretation or my reading of the Bible and the creation, and how science is actually enlightened. So in that series, I call that the Big Bang, Birth of God, and or the Big Bang, the Birth of God, and the scientific knowledge that has enlightened or shone light on the God's word. So we'll have several programs on this network, and like I say, if you guys are also interested in participating, I'm more than happy to welcome you aboard, and would love to have your videos if it fits in with what I'm doing, what I'm trying to communicate. Love to post videos and links that you might have, and certainly look forward to your comments and questions, and try to answer them as best I can. Um, and that's where we're going to go with this venture. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.